Hi, Doug Carlsen again. This is part 2 of the Millionaire Doctor. We're going to talk about aspirationals and the glittering rich today. Again, apologies, I'll be reading off a board behind the camera there. In fact, I'm going to start out by reading out of a book. This is from 2009, Thomas Stanley, Stop Acting Rich. Great book. It's a follow-up to the Millionaire Next Door. I'm going to do a couple quotes here. First of all, the reason why so many homeowners today are having a difficult time making ends meet goes way beyond mortgage payment. When you trade up to a more expensive home, there is pressure for you to spend on every conceivable product and service. Nothing has greater impact on your wealth and your consumption than your choice of house and neighborhood. Let's go on. What we don't realize is that the true cost of living in certain homes and neighborhoods is unseen but truly devastating. Devastating, that's a pretty strong word. I believe the greatest detriment to building wealth is our home and neighborhood environment. If you live in a pricey home and neighborhood, you will act and buy like your neighbors. In other words, human beings have an innate tendency to act and be like those around them, to fit in, and even to compete. The type of home we live in and where we choose to live often takes the greatest toll on our financial wealth, and from it all the perils that flow. The more expensive homes, the more affluent neighborhoods are a vortex of sociological forces. I like that, a vortex of sociological forces. As we see throughout this book, the more affluent the neighborhood, the more the residents spend on almost every conceivable product and service, from cars to haircuts, and from wine to watches. Those living in prestige estates spend more. We take consumption cues from our neighbors. If many of our neighbors have a much higher level of income and wealth than we do, we will set ourselves up to lose the war before we even have begun to battle. Pretty strong words. Let's get going here. Stanley in this book talks in terms of aspirationals. Much of income for the aspirationals goes into high consumption items that offer high social status. High consumption items that offer high social status. Again, if you live in a nice neighborhood, you're going to consume differently. Home, cars, clothing, designer golf equipment, and club memberships are all important. These people, the aspirationals, Stanley says, are income statement affluent. They include MDs, attorneys, dentists, and managers of major corporations. Income statement affluent. They make a lot of income. They don't necessarily have any wealth. 2% of millionaires are glitteringly rich. Interesting group. 2% of the millionaires are glitteringly rich. A lot of them are sports stars or actors. These people, Stanley says, come from a depressed childhood. In other words, they didn't have anything to begin with, and they're darn sure to let people know that they're never going to be in that category again. And because of that, they have very high consumption on glittering objects. Interesting part too is that almost all of them have more than enough money to cover their spending habits. These are people with $50 million plus normally, and they have money left over. Doesn't always happen that way, of course, you know, but more often than not, they're within their budget. The other 98% of millionaires live more like Warren Buffett. In a fairly conservative house, they don't spend a lot on various objects or things, and we'll get into that. But they live a middle class type life from our viewpoint. Aspirationals emulate the glittering rich, that 2% that spend a lot with their wealth. The other 98% that are basically boring to the rest of us, we will ignore. Okay, favorite shopping for the aspirationals. That includes a lot of doctors, dentists, and lawyers. Saks and Neiman Marcus for shopping. BMWs and Mercedes are the chosen models, which I talked about in the previous edition of the Millionaire Doctor. The one product most associated with the glittering rich these days, this is interesting, is Grey Goose vodka. Now, this is not the most expensive liquor that there is out there, but Grey Goose vodka, I can't say it, Grey Goose vodka is the one product that's most associated with glittering riches. Well, how do you entertain like the glittering rich? If you're an aspirational, how do you do this? Well, if you don't have a large home, make sure that you entertain at a very high-class restaurant that has the finest spirits and the best wines, and you absolutely need to order the most expensive entrees. This can get extremely expensive, but hey, it's important to some of us. If you have a large home, how do you do it? Well, first of all, make sure that you're catering from a famous, well-known, expensive restaurant. You need to serve the best wines, the best spirits, obviously Grey Goose. And the other thing that you absolutely need to have is a wine cellar with an extensive collection. This is the most important part of having something happen at home, is to have that wine cellar. Got to show it to the people also. Okay, let's look at characteristics of income statement affluent, those that have a lot of income but not necessarily wealth, and what Stanley calls balance statement affluent. These are the real millionaires. They may not have a high income, but they have high wealth. Okay, income statement affluent first. Watches that they like to wear: Breitling, Cartier, Rolex. Premium spirits are important. Custom homes are important. Watches are important. And a lot of times, especially men, are watch collectors. And if you're a watch collector, obviously you have to have a display case, and you have to have automatic watch winders. And you need basically one to wear every day of the month, or 31 watches. Oftentimes people will spend well over $300,000 for their watch collection. Special note here that Stanley gives is the most prominent sign for men of high consumption is the Rolex watch. Most prominent sign for men of high consumption is the Rolex watch. Interesting. Let's talk about balance statement affluent, the real millionaires. The professions that are most apt to have real wealth: engineers, which may make sense, farmers, obviously, teachers. Some are higher ed, some are K through 12. Teachers. Now, why would that be? Because they usually don't live a high-flying lifestyle, and most of them have pensions. Okay, more facts about the real millionaires. Average auto price when they buy an auto is $32,000. Only $32,000. Boats, normally they don't have them. Why? Because they take too much time, money, and hassle. Time is really important to wealthy people. Extremely important. What about second homes? Again, too much time. Also, Stanley says everyone underestimates the building cost, furniture cost, maintenance and upgrade cost. And if they do buy, normally within a short period of time, they realize that it would be less expensive to stay in a Ritz-Carlton or a Four Seasons nearby. This is absolutely true. Okay, more facts. Median price for home for those that have wealth of between 2.5 and 5 million. 2.5 to 5 million. What's the median price of a home that they live in? $600,000. Where do real millionaires shop? Nordstrom is a big favorite. But also Macy's, Kohl's, Target, and Costco. All of them are about even as far as percentages of where real millionaires shop. Again, Target, Costco, and Kohl's are right in the mix there, as well as Nordstrom. Dining out, here's a good statistic. 1 in 300 millionaire couples will pay more than $100 for two for their favorite place that they normally frequent for dining. Only 1 out of 300 will pay more than $100 $100 for a meal for two. The $5,000 suit, almost no millionaires have one, only 1 in 900. That's like 0.1% of real millionaires have a $5,000 suit. That's it for this session. Part 3 comes up next week.